Welcome, if you will, please, Chip Conley to LinkedIn.
That is a lot to live up to. Hi, everybody. I'm impressed that the first people who got here came to the front. Usually people end up filling up back first. Nothing wrong with you guys in the back, but there's a bunch of people here in the front. That's very impressive. Someone was saying you guys lean in that's one of your cultural. It's not one of your specific cultural values. It's sort of a piece of the culture. Is that people lean into what they do. Well, I guess I've leaned in for a long time. I'm going to tell you a little bit of my story. But what I'm going to try to do today is to introduce you to a theory of human psychology and motivation that we applied in my company during the dot-com bust. And it helped us triple in size. And now lots of companies, everybody from Tony Hsieh and Zappos to the folks at Whole Foods Markets, have applied this theory, the peak theory, that I'm going to talk about today. And I feel really lucky that Brooke and whomever else had something to do with it have bought books, which you're going to get when you leave today. You get a book when you leave. So for those of you who think, oh, he said too much too quickly, it's in the book, usually. So you'll have a chance to actually read about it there. And feel free, we'll have some questions and answers at the end. All right, should we get started? Let's do it. All right, so philosophically for a moment, life and business is all about where you pay your attention. And if you actually look at the great spiritual traditions and religions, it has a lot to do with where do you pay your attention. One of the things I'm going to talk about today is where are you paying your attention in your career, and where is LinkedIn paying its attention on the employee pyramid and the customer pyramid. We're going to see a lot of pyramids today because I have pyramid envy. I like Abraham Maslow's hierarchy of needs, and that is in the form of a pyramid. So let's start by talking about the fact that each of us in our work or just in our day-to-day life have various levels of fulfillment. These are three different people. I don't know how your day is going so far. Which of these people most embodies your day? In the course of any particular day, you may move up and down that pyramid. You may be the guy at the bottom of the pyramid just sort of like saying, what the heck am I doing here today? Or you may be that woman at the top, jumping for joy. That's true in the course of a day. It's also true of companies. One of the things we forget, the most neglected fact in business, what do you think it is? People. It is people. It's the most neglected fact in business is that we're all human. And the thing that's interesting about us as humans is when I went to Stanford and I went to Stanford Business School. When I was at Stanford Business School, I learned all about computers, and Stanford undergrad too. And I sort of learned the operating manual for computers. When I was in high school, I learned the operating manual for driving a car. Nobody ever issued me an operating manual for understanding humans. I'm going to try to give you a little bit of an operating manual today about how to focus on humans. What's interesting is if the most neglected fact in business is that we're all human, why is it surprising that pyramid we just saw that applied to people would also apply to companies? Here's three companies in a difficult industry, the airline industry, and Southwest Airlines for the last 40 years. Now, Continental and United have combined since the slide came out. But the reality is Southwest Airlines is a fulfilled company. It's an organization that actually lives by the principles I'm going to present to you today. And what a lot of it comes back to is just the idea that how do we help people live up to their full potential? That sounds like a LinkedIn sort of approach to doing business, and it's certainly the approach of the best companies out there. So each of us in our work, this is actually a slide that I think is particularly relevant to this company. Each of us in our work have one of three relationships with our work. You either have a job, a career, or a calling. In a few minutes, when I'll actually show you the employee pyramid, I'll actually tell you how to distinguish between a job and a calling. And in the last chapter of the book, you'll get the book, chapter 14 of the book, there's actually a test you can take. 15 questions that helps you understand whether you currently have a job, a career, or a calling, if you don't know. But the reality is, the best companies out there learn how to turn this pyramid into a cylinder. What do you think I mean by that? Anybody want to give it a shot at explaining that? Oh, come on. Yes? Yeah. Well, what he said over here is if you go into a cylinder, there's no hierarchy. True, but actually what it's more specific about is that if a pyramid defines this job, career, calling perspective, what it's suggesting is that only a small percentage of us can live a calling in our work. Most of us have a job. Great companies turn it into a cylinder such that maybe just as many people in the company are having a calling as are having a job. Let me tell you a story. So I was flying in November of 2008 between Austin, Texas and Dallas, Texas. I was giving a speech at this conscious capitalism conference, and I was coming back to Dallas on my way back to San Francisco. And I was on Southwest Airlines on a plane, and as I was in the back of the plane, I saw this guy walk down the aisle and hand out peanuts after we were up in the air. And he was not a flight attendant, and he was just handing out peanuts. I thought it was like one of the passengers. Like, oh, well, that's nice, I mean, maybe he's getting a discounted fare or something like that. So he gets to the back of the plane. I actually look at my Southwest Spirit magazine, and there's that picture of the guy who's handing out. It's the CEO of the company. It's not Herb Kelleher. Herb Kelleher was the CEO for a long time and used to do that. It's a guy named Gary Kelly. So here's Gary Kelly in the back of the plane by himself. No one's talking to him. And I said, well, I'm going to go up and talk to him because, as Janine knows, Janine is right there with Joie de Vivre. We do a lot of work with Southwest Airlines, the two companies. I said, I'm going to go talk to the guy. So I go to the back of the plane, and I say, hi, I'm Chip. I founded Joie de Vivre, and we do a lot of marketing together. And I said, this is November of 2008. And if you remember 2008, it was 3 years ago? Back then we had a robust worldwide economy. I know it's hard to imagine. And you know that partly because gas and fuel prices went through the roof, right? The first half of 2008 just went crazy. Summer of 2008, what did the airlines start doing? They raised prices a little bit, but they started charging for things that they hadn't charged before, like bags. What else? Blankets, food. What's that? Legroom. And there was one airline in Europe that almost started charging for the bathrooms. Ryanair, they're going to have coin-operated bathrooms. But Southwest Airlines didn't do any of that. And so I asked him, November of 2008, why are you not charging for bags? I just left it to the bags. And of course, the natural answer you'd think he'd say would be, well, our customers, they appreciate that we're affordable and all that. That's what I'd expect him to say. You know what he said? He pointed to the flight attendants, and he said, have you ever noticed that the flight attendants on Southwest are having a different time in their work than those on United? And have you noticed it before? Yes. And I said, yeah. And he said, my job as the CEO of this company, and the job of all the leaders in our company, is to make sure when we make a decision in the company, we know how it's going to impact the people who are going to be customer serving. When the head of United Airlines decided to actually charge for bags, he turned their flight attendants, who already didn't like their job, into baggage handlers. Because guess what the customer did? They started bringing all of their bags on the plane. That's us. We all did that. Because we wanted to save money. We didn't want to have to pay for our bags and check our bags. So the flight attendants on United, who already hated their jobs, all of a sudden had a much harder job to get the plane off the ground on time because everybody was bringing on the bags. And what he said is this, and this is the important thing relative to this slide. He said, we're in the business as leaders to help our employees feel like they're living their calling. And we got to do everything in our power to help them live their calling. So we'll talk a little bit more about this in a few minutes. My calling? Well, I had no idea. I went to Stanford. I focused on commercial real estate at Stanford, which they don't even have a degree in that or anything like that. But I started working in commercial real estate in the Valley in 1980, a long time ago. And I was accepted directly into Stanford Business School. Doesn't happen very often. In fact, it happens almost never. But it was 1982. I'm very old. So it was 1982, and it was the last time we had an unemployment rate this high. And so I said, well, I don't want to go try to get a job now. I'll just apply to business school, and if I get in, I'll go. And I was lucky. I got accepted straight into Stanford, so I was at Stanford 6 years in a row, 4 years undergrad, 2 years of business school. Between my first and second year of business school, I went to work for Morgan Stanley in New York in the investment bank in their real estate division. Realized I didn't want to be wearing suspenders and smoking a cigar for a living, which is what you do as an investment banker. And I wanted to do something that was get my hands dirty. I wanted to be an entrepreneur. So in my second year of Stanford Business School, I had a lot of job offers. I was lucky enough to have a lot, and I took the job that paid me the least. So I was the youngest guy in my class. The next youngest guy in my class is a guy named Seth Godin. Have you ever heard of Seth? Seth and I are good friends. And so I took a job out of Stanford Business School. I had job offers that were going to pay me a lot more, 3 times more. I took a job out of Stanford Business School that paid me $24,000 a year. Crazy. So when they have that, they have like a bell curve of the salaries of people graduating. It was really interesting. I saw the bell curve, and it was like, okay, and there's like $50,000 was the next to lowest, and then there was this big gap, and then there's like this little blip there, $24,000. That was me. I took the job out of the business school that actually paid me by far the least, but it was the one that I actually felt like it was going to prepare me to do what I wanted to do with my life. What I wanted to do is I wanted to be an entrepreneur when I grew up. So I said the best thing to do if I'm going to be an entrepreneur is to go learn from an entrepreneur. And I went to work for a commercial real estate developer who'd gone to Stanford Business School 10 years earlier. And I started learning from him. Now, I thought I was going into my calling. I was 23 years old. I was ready to take on the world. I was very ambitious. But within a year, I was bored stiff, and I hated my job because, number one, I spent almost all my time in front of a computer just doing Lotus 1, 2, 3 spreadsheets. And secondly, when I was working with people, it was almost always adversarial. It was negotiations. And so as is true with many of us, if you're not finding your calling in your work, you end up looking for it elsewhere. And sometimes that means you become a Boy Scout troop leader, or you become a political activist, or you become a marathon runner, or in my case, I became a screenwriter, and I went down to a place called the Esalen Institute in Big Sur, which is I'm actually going to this weekend because I'm on the board of directors there now, and I learned how to become a massage therapist. I was the only Stanford MBA who was going to become a massage therapist when he grew up. But at age 26, on my 26th birthday, I finished a business plan to start a boutique hotel company. Now, this is 1986, when boutique hotels in America, most people didn't know what that meant. I mean, that just didn't have people. The first boutique hotel that really sort of was created in the U.S. was about 1982. So in 1986, I decided to start a company. I'm 26, have no experience in hotels. I don't have any money, but I did. I started a company. I called it Joie de Vivre. Very impractical name for a company. It's hard to pronounce, hard to spell. Most Americans don't know what it means. Do you know what it means? Joy of life. Thank you. Well, you're a smarter group. And then I bought this motel in the Tenderloin that used to be called the Caravan Lodge. And because you're a young group and relatively clean cut, none of you ever stayed at the Caravan Lodge back then, right? No. Okay. There are times when I talk to a bigger group and someone raises their hand and I say I'm embarrassed for them because this hotel was, you walked in and the nightly rates were posted in the lobby, which is sometimes the case, but in a smaller font, the hourly rates were posted in the lobby. It was very popular at lunchtime and there was no restaurant. You know what I mean? So you get it? One of those kind of places. Biggest corporate account was Vinny and his girls. So turn it into the Phoenix. And the Phoenix, what I wanted at age 26 is I wanted all the rock and roll bands to stay with me. I mean, the Marriotts and the Hiltons didn't want those guys. And so I decided I wanted musicians and filmmakers and creative people. And I created a really cool hotel in a really bad neighborhood. And what it taught me was, there's a great American expression, you are what you eat. Sort of a scary American expression when you look at the weight problems in this country. But in the boutique hotel business, it's not you are what you eat, it's you are where you sleep. And what that taught me was the following. Every time we create a hotel, a boutique hotel, and over the course of the last 25 years, we've created over 50 boutique hotels. We don't have them all anymore. We've sold some, and et cetera. But every time we create a hotel, it's based upon a magazine and 5 words. Why do you think boutique hotels and magazines have something in common? Or what do they have in common? They're visual, okay? Personality, absolutely, very, very unique personality, lifestyle. What's that? The audience, very niche audience. So boutique hotels go after a certain niche of people. If you're the Holiday Inn, you want everybody. And maybe people like Holiday Inn, but does anybody love Holiday Inn? No. We're at the other extreme. We're interested in getting people who love us. And not everybody has to like us in terms of individual hotels. So every time we create a hotel, it's based upon a magazine. That first hotel that was going to be the Rock and Roll Hotel became the Phoenix. And it was based upon Rolling Stone magazine. We came up with 5 adjectives to define Rolling Stone: funky, irreverent, adventurous, cool, and young at heart. And everything we did in creating that hotel had to come back to those 5 adjectives. So the kind of staff we hired funky, irreverent staff, the kind of art we had in the guest rooms, the kind of decor, the kind of unique services and amenities. What we found, people fell in love with the hotel, which was great. But what was interesting is the people who fell in love with the hotel were people who would use those 5 adjectives to describe themselves. You are where you sleep. What we found is that the hotel was a mirror for the aspirations of the customers, and we were creating what I call an identity refreshment. If you go stay at the Phoenix for 3 days, you actually leave 3 days later feeling a little bit more funky and irreverent. Now, my mother is not funky and irreverent, so that's why we created other hotels for other magazines and other niches of people. The Rex, bottom left-hand corner there, it's based upon New Yorker magazine. Clever, literate, artistic, worldly, and sophisticated. Upper right-hand corner, how many of you have stayed at the Hotel Avante in Mountain View? Okay. They're all in the back of the room. Okay. Well, the Hotel Avante, you and Google arm wrestled for rooms there because this is Google's hotel. I mean, Google should own the hotel. They should buy the hotel. Janine, why don't you work on that? Let's get Google to buy that hotel. No, we don't want that because that means that LinkedIn couldn't stand there anymore. But this is our first hotel we created in the Valley. At one point, we had 7 hotels in the Valley, including Santa Cruz. We have the Dream Inn over in Santa Cruz, which we did a renovation of about 2 or 3 years ago. The Hotel Avante was our first in the Valley, and what we decided is to use Wired as our touchstone. And the 5 adjectives that we define Wired for Wired, and Janine will correct me because I come up with one. So smart, creative,
Yep.
Visionary, iconoclastic,
Yep.
and then I say techie. She says something else, but
Avant-garde.
Avant-garde, okay. Techie avant-garde, there you go, that's Wired. Strangely enough, we opened that hotel in 2000, and within a year or 2, all of a sudden, Google became our biggest account there. But it's because those 5 words, smart, creative, visionary, iconoclastic, sort of describe how Google likes to think of themselves. So the mirror for the person was also the mirror for the company. And the company liked that identity. And so when people would come visit Google people said, hey, we want them to have a full experience. We don't want them to stay at a Marriott and then come to Google. So, and then the bottom right-hand corner is the Vitale. Real simple meets dwell, the 5 words, modern, urbane, fresh, natural, and nurturing. It's by far the most successful luxury hotel in San Francisco. So we were connecting with our customers on a psychographic basis, what we look like on the inside, as opposed to a demographic basis, what we look like on the outside. By year 2000, we had 20 hotels only in the Bay Area. We were one of the largest hoteliers, boutique hoteliers in the country, and we'd grown a lot. This is, speaking of hearts, this is the joie de vivre heart. This is how we do business. When I go to Stanford Business School or Harvard Business School and give speeches, they say, come and present your business model. And I come and I present this slide. And they laugh and say, okay, that's great, but no, show us your real business model. And I say, no, this is our business model. And it is. And it's based upon a theory that came out of Harvard Business School in the early 1980s called the service profit chain. And what they found was companies that are in the service business, and 69% of the world's GDP today is service industry. So companies that are in the service industry, if they create a unique corporate culture, it tends to drive employee satisfaction, which tends to drive customer loyalty. which tends to drive a profitable and sustainable business. And it's like a virtuous circle. The culture ultimately is the input, which creates the input of happy staff, happy customers, and the output is a profitable business and a sustainable business. So we turned it into the form of a heart at Joie de Vivre because, frankly, we wanted to make sure all of our employees, about half of whom have English as a second language, could get it and that they just really understood what we were all about. And it was great. And I call this karmic capitalism. It's like what goes around comes around. And so that's sort of what this our whole approach to business is. By early 2001, now the story starts getting a little ugly. By early 2001, we were flying high. We were the largest hotelier here in the Northern California. We had 20 hotels around the Bay Area, and we had no hotels anywhere outside the Bay Area. And between 1995 and 2000, that was a very good thing during the dot-com boom. But in 2001, the world changed. And I don't know how many of you were working in Silicon Valley in 2001, 2002. How many of you? It got ugly, didn't it? It got ugly very fast also. Well, this book came out in January of 2001. Richard Branson wrote the foreword to it. It was my first book that I wrote. But as I was going out and talking about this book, I could just see my company starting to go down the tubes because the dot-com bust affected everybody, not just the tech business, but anybody in any business in the Bay Area. And all of our hotels were in this market. And between 2001 and 2005, Bay Area hotels saw the largest percentage revenue drop in the history of American hotels since World War II. And all of our hotels were in this market. And I didn't have deep pockets. I went from being the guy on the left to the guy on the right really quickly because I had all my eggs in the wrong basket at that point. And it wasn't just the 9/11 had happened. Then we had 9/11. We had the dot-com bust. Then we had 9/11. Then we had, what else did we have going on? We had the Afghani war started, and then we had a recession start, and then we had SARS. When SARS happened in Asia, number one, and travel from Asia dropped by 90% for about a 10-month period. Number one location Asians travel to when they come to the U.S. is the Bay Area. And then we're called Joie de Vivre. Now, I thought that was, it's a sort of an impractical name, but I thought it was a good name. Well, in 2003, without getting too political, the U.S. went to war with Iraq. And then in America, we stopped eating French fries. Do you remember that? Yeah. What did we start eating instead?
Freedom fries.
Yes. Yeah, we'll never stop eating French fries. We'll just call it something different. And we did that because we started boycotting French companies in the U.S. So the name of my company, it's called Joie de Vivre. I started getting emails from Alabama and Los Gatos. And they would write me, and they would say, we're boycotting all French companies. We just want you to know that. We're doing a boycott campaign of Joie de Vivre. I would write them back, and they'd say, wait a minute. We're not based in Paris. We're based in San Francisco. And I would get a very quick, terse response back saying, oh, that's worse. The fact we were based in San Francisco. So we were in trouble because we were part of a boycott campaign. Next thing I knew, it's like everything that could go wrong did go wrong, as well as these guys. Now, you know the expression disruptive innovation. It's one well known in the high-tech industry. Well, I'm in the hotel business. I think that the last industry that would ever get disruptively innovated would be hotels because we're about as non-techy as you can imagine. We got disruptively innovated about 10 years ago by these guys. The world changed in terms of how people actually bought their hotel rooms. And this wasn't good for us because it was a much more commoditized approach. Plus, we pay a commission to the Expedias of the world. What type of commission do you think? It's less now, but back then, what kind of commission do you think we paid to Expedia? 10%? Who said 25? Dude, that's it. Let him negotiate for LinkedIn from now on. So 25% commission. Can you imagine that? So if you actually all of a sudden overnight, you were starting to book on Expedia, and if you booked on Expedia, we had to give 25% of what you paid back to Expedia. It completely changed our business model. So we were in a lot of trouble, and that's why one day I was looking at it. We have about 3,300 employees today. Back then we had 1,000 employees. But I could look at the cash flow 3 months ahead and say, fall like October, November of 2001. 2001. I had no idea how we were going to make payroll in February. That's when I went in the local bookstore. I was initially looking for a business book. Like, okay, I learned something at Stanford Business School. Maybe I could go back and try to find something. Within 5 minutes, I ended up moving from the business section of the bookstore to the self-help section of the bookstore. And that's That's where I got reacquainted with Abe Maslow. How many of you know something about Abe Maslow, hierarchy of needs? All right, most of you do. Let me just talk a little bit about that. Pyramid. Maslow, back in the 1940s, said, why is it, he said, actually, a famous quote. You've heard this quote, you just didn't know it was Maslow. If the only tool you have is a hammer, everything starts to look like a nail. He said that to the psychology profession. Because he said, why is it that we as psychologists only look at people who are broken? Why do we think humans are always broken and we're just here to fix them? What if there are people who are fulfilled in life like that woman at the top of the pyramid who is jumping? Let's go study her. What can we learn from her? And then what we learn from her, we can apply to everybody else. And that's what he did. And he ultimately created this hierarchy of needs pyramids, which basically said there are physiological needs we have safety needs. Once your needs are partly met in one category, you go up the pyramid. Social belonging needs, then esteem needs. And what he talked about is at the top of the pyramid, we have self-actualization. When you're feeling self-actualized, it's like being all you can be, to steal a phrase from the U.S. Army, strangely enough, who stole it from Maslow. So when people are actually in being all they can be, they're fulfilled in life. And what Maslow said, that is when people feel like they're at their best. So I was reading this book, and I called my company Joie de Vivre, and I'm thinking, wow, maybe I can be self-actualized too, but maybe even my company can. And that's the question I started asking myself. If each of us individually can be self-actualized, why can't a company? Why couldn't you create a self-actualized company as a whole? And what would that company look like? So we took Maslow's hierarchy of needs and we applied it to the hotel experience. Because generally speaking, when I first said this to some of my senior executives in the company, they looked at me like, oh, Chip, you've been hanging out at Esalen too much. You're a little, this is a little wacky. But when we applied what our hotel guests were looking for on the pyramid, it made a lot of sense. You might even be able to do this with customers of LinkedIn. It's like with your customers, your clients. It helped us get to a place where we said, this is relevant to us. But we wanted to simplify it a little bit. And so we took the Maslow's hierarchy of needs and we turned it into a 3-level pyramid. Survival, succeed, transform. With each of those levels, so survival has the physiological and safety needs, the 2 bottom levels. Succeed is social belonging and esteem, and transformation is self-actualization. I would suggest that what we're going to do in the next 10 minutes or 10, 15 minutes or so, and then we'll have Q&A, is I'm going to actually go through and explain how you'd apply this to your employees, your customers, and very briefly to investors. But I would say since transformation is your number one, it's the first cultural value of the company, isn't it? Like the first one on the list? I would ask yourself, how do you, in your life, apply this pyramid? How do you actually move beyond success? Because in America, we get very wrapped up in success. And yet when we feel most at peace with the world and most self-actualized is when we've moved to that place of transformation. So we'll talk about that in a minute. Let's apply this to the employee pyramid first. So survival, succeed, transform, applied to the employee experience, is money, recognition, and meaning. Now this doesn't mean that there aren't investment bankers out there, having been in the profession, who are money, money, money. There's lots of people for whom money, money, money. The reality is, I believe, and I've actually spoken to lots of investment banking groups, that the way the pyramid for an investment banking group works, I'm going to go over here for a second, is this money line here is way up here. And there's still like a little icing on the cake of a middle level of recognition and then a little bit of meaning. But the bottom line is people are at the baseline for our survival. We want a good compensation package. It's very important to us. It's how we make a living. But it's not the number one reason people leave their jobs. And you know this better than I do. What's the number one reason people leave their jobs in America? Right? Bad manager. People join a company and they leave their boss. People join a company and they leave their boss. Yep. And so money is a commodity. It's a baseline. What you're going to see as we move up each of these pyramids is you move from a commoditized place to a differentiated place. from a tangible place to an intangible place. Money is important, but if it was the only thing that was important, someone could come and offer you 3% more and you'd leave your job and go do something else. So there's other things that are important too. The middle level of the pyramid is recognition. How do you feel recognized, first by your boss, then by your peers, then by the organization as a whole? How does that show up? It usually shows up in career development. It shows up in feeling good about what you're doing, feeling seen for who you are, and you end up being loyal as a result of that. We as a company, as Janine will tell you, our employee benefits, our employee pay is no better than the industry average at all. And in fact, our benefits are even a little bit worse on some level, on the health side, frankly. Everybody has to go to Kaiser. We have no other choices. Well, we actually have a little bit of other choice, but our benefits package is not great. We do have sabbatical every 3 years. So every 3 years, any salaried person in the company gets a 1-month sabbatical. Cool. But people don't stay in Joie de Vivre because of the fact that we are the best compensator. Yet our turnover as a company is 1/3 of the industry average. Why? This level, recognition. People feel loyal to each other. But what's at the top of the pyramid here goes beyond recognition. And remember job career calling? It's up there. Take a look. Job career calling matches up here. When someone actually moves from the success level of the career and recognition to the meaning level, they have moved from external or extrinsic recognition or extrinsic motivation to intrinsic motivation. And when you actually make that leap from being externally motivated, because money and recognition are external motivators, feeling a sense of meaning in what you do or in what the organization does, and ideally both. If you can do both, it's even more combustible. If you feel good about who you work for as a company and what it does as its mission and what you do within that organization, it's huge. And that's what Gary Kelly was talking about at Southwest Airlines, is help people see that in the company. Great leaders help employees move from money to recognition to meaning. It doesn't mean that the money and the recognition aren't important. The base of every pyramid is important, but it means that there's something higher. And the great companies out there are the ones that take their employees up that ladder. All right, we're going to keep going, and then I'm going to open it up for Q&A. Customer pyramid. As you think about this customer pyramid, think about your customers for LinkedIn. I will tell you, and I'm going to give you a criticism. I think LinkedIn is an amazing company. I'm involved. I got a profile. I do a lot on LinkedIn. And there's a reason for this, I'm sure. But I can tell you that when I go to your website and I go to your homepage, I know you want to keep it simple. There is no messaging of transformation there at all. None at all. And I would love to see more of that. And maybe it's somewhere more embedded in terms of the experience. But, she's smiling. She thinks I'm saying something way out of school here. But I feel like LinkedIn is a transformational company, but it isn't quite obvious to me on the homepage. And let me explain that for a minute. So this is the customer pyramid. The baseline of what customers want, the survival need for customers, whether you're a dry cleaner or a defense contractor, your customers want to have their expectations met. In the context of a hotel, if I'm the Four Seasons, our customers expect something very high. If I'm the Motel 6, very different. So a lot has to do with what a reputation is and what people pay. But that's the baseline, having expectations met, and that creates satisfaction. And 30 years ago, 20 years ago, that's how Sears and General Motors were able to survive, because they just satisfied their customers. They didn't do anything better than that. And today, satisfaction is not good enough, and just meeting expectations is not good enough, right? We live in a completely more competitive era. So meeting desires, step above that, will create a more committed customer. So you might ask yourself when you're thinking about this, what's the difference between one of my customers or my customer profile, because you have different kinds of customers at LinkedIn. What would be an expectation our customers have, and what would be a desire, a step above it? And companies, how do people track that? Well, Amazon and Netflix do a really good job, of generally, from a consumer perspective, of tracking my desires of what I like to buy or rent from them. And you probably have all kinds of ways to do that too. But understanding the desires of customers and then delivering on those, that creates a customer who feels like they're successful. But again, the quantum leap from the success level to the transformation level is when a customer actually has their unrecognized needs met. What does that mean? What does that mean when someone actually has their unrecognized needs met as a customer? Think back to a customer experience you had, or think about a company that you're an evangelist for. Who is a company that you're an evangelist for, or that the world, that company is so good at what they do that their customers do most of the marketing for the company? Who?
Apple.
Yeah, of course, it's the first one. No matter where I am in the world giving a speech, that's always the first one that's mentioned. Apple. What Apple understands unrecognized needs of customers exceptionally well. They're 5 years ahead of us usually in terms of thinking, what is it the customer is going to want next? Who else? What's that? Starwood. Starwood, the hotel company. Yeah, good. I mean, especially for some of I think less today than 10 years ago, 5 years ago, but yes. Who else? Virgin. Mini Cooper? Oh, the Mini Cooper. Yeah. Okay. Who else? LinkedIn. Good job. He's in the first row. Where's the apple? You're supposed to give an apple to something. You're like, great companies that do this can mind read their customers. So you're all going to get a book. Chapter 9 in the book is the chapter on meeting unrecognized needs. I'm not going to go through it right now unless someone wants to ask it in the Q&A. There are 4 themes for mind reading your customers. There's 4 ways to actually understand what would actually deliver on the unrecognized needs of a customer. It's a hard question to ask. How do you actually know what a customer wants if they don't ask for it? But there's ways to do that. Let me finish up. This is the investor pyramid. I'm going to spend 0 time on this. This is all, not because investors aren't human, but because I'm running out of time. And there chapters 10, 11, and 12 in the book will allow you to understand that. And it's a very important part. If you have toxic investors in a company, I promise you it affects everybody in the company. So looking at how to self-actualize your investors is really important too. This is all 3 pyramids together. Employee pyramid on the bottom left, the customer pyramid in the middle at the top, and then the investor pyramid on the bottom right. What's in the middle that is missing here that you saw it earlier? What's that? No, but good thinking. Who's it? What's that?
The heart.
The heart. Dude, you're right. The heart. Heart goes in the middle. Strangely enough, that business model of the heart, which we created at Joie-de-Vivre in 1997, came back in 2003 when we created this whole model. And interestingly enough about the heart, look at the heart for a second. Point number 1, the heart is creating a unique corporate culture. Point number 2 on the heart is building an enthusiastic staff. Which pyramid is that next to? It's next to the employee pyramid. So the staff, point number 2, next to the employee pyramid. Developing a strong customer loyalty, point number 3 on the heart, is next to the customer pyramid. Point number 4 on the heart, maintaining a profitable and sustainable business, next to the investor pyramid. So if you get it right, here's the cheesy part of my presentation, or at least one of the cheesy parts of my presentation. The heart beats. Okay, there you go. It's like the hallmark part of my presentation. Yes, you like that. Okay. Well, I come to the Valley and I try to be really tech savvy. But the point is, when you actually have a model like this, use Southwest Airlines as an example, having happy flight attendants creates happy customers, which creates happy investors. And it's a holistic model. And it's very true, and it's worked. So there's a bunch of companies out there, bunch of companies out there that use Peak or have used Maslow in how they do business. And this is some of them that have actually studied Maslow. So, lots of stories in the book about this. And just finally, let me sum up by saying, what I really believe at the heart of all this is that if you create peak experiences, which is an expression that Maslow used back in the 1940s, if you create peak experiences for people, it will create peak performance for an organization. Because what happens as you move up that pyramid, from the survival level, which is where fear is, which is where most companies live in a sort of a place of fear. As you move up from survival to succeed to transform, you move from the commoditized place to loyalty and differentiation. Because as you move up that pyramid, you're creating something that's different. And you're creating a much more unique experience for your employees or for your customers or for your investors. So I hope you'll all seek the peak. That's a website that talks a little bit more about my books. That's the JDV website if you want to actually check that out. And I'm now going to open it up for any questions, and hopefully I'll have some answers. So thank you. All right, anybody have questions? There's the ability to go up to the mic right there. Think about how you would apply this to LinkedIn or to your own career or your own calling. Ask me a difficult question if you want. Okay. There you go.
So you mentioned when you come to our site, you don't see transformation, and I think one of the biggest...
Wait. Your website, not
website,
here.
Not here.
Yeah.
Definitely here you see transformation. So I guess one of the biggest hurdles that we have when we have 120 million professionals across the globe, transformation means something so different to each one of those professionals, whether it's finding a new client today, getting a job, finding a new business partner, getting funding. How do you make something that's a message that's so personalized and transformation is so specific to what you want extend to 120 million people?
Stay there for a second. So true, but could that also be the same as success? Would success, we all define success in different ways potentially, and we all may define transformation in different ways. I agree that transformation may seem a little bit more abstract. As you move up that pyramid from survival to succeed to transform, you are moving from tangible needs to intangible needs. So I'm with you, and I think if the whole site was all about transformation, it would look like it belongs in Marin County. And you need to have an audience that's much bigger than Marin County. But maybe a little hint here or there of the idea, because I think what people are looking for today, especially as this recession or whatever it is we're in continues, is they are getting to a place where they really want transformation. And they are looking for something that can give them a sense that transformation is in the not too distant future, because status quo is so rotten for them. And so I don't know. I mean, I say this to be provocative, to just throw it out there, and to say, how could you give people the sense that the hope for transformation is practically available to them? And that's what's great about LinkedIn, is you've made the practical side of transformation available to people. So I don't know. That's all.
Yeah, it was more of a brainstorm question, just
Yeah.
in terms of how do you make that accessible to 120 million people? Because if we feature one success story of someone building their small business, to someone who's a salesperson, maybe that's not what transformation would mean to them. So it's like, well, that's nice, but that doesn't apply to me.
Yeah, no, you're right that I do think actually telling stories is a really valuable way of helping people. And the technology people in the room might know how you could help tell the right story to the right people, because you can actually, based upon what the profile is of the person who's on the site, you can actually make sure that the story you're telling could actually help be relevant to them.
Although you don't always put a flag on your profile saying I'm looking for a new job or I'm looking for a client. So that's kind of a tough one too.
That's true. No, that's good. It's worth talking about. Yes, here's the Starwood guy.
I'm a loyal fan of them.
Okay.
Not to say that your hotels aren't great.
Okay.
Thanks for coming in, Chip. I think your framework is really exceptional and it's really inspiring. As you think back, I'd be interested in another story from you. If you could tell us maybe one of the ways in which you implemented this. So as you think about these principles, it's a wonderful framework for an employee to reference, and I'm sure it gives great focus around your core principles in operating your companies. But can you think back to maybe the implementation? So this is an implementation question. Is there something one event or one thing you did, whether employees, customers, that yielded high impact results?
Yep. Let me give you one that you could start doing at LinkedIn tomorrow. and it's a simple one, and it's the recognition level of the pyramid. One of the things that's very true of companies that are growing very fast, or companies that are in the middle of something that's stressful, is it's very easy to just become transactional. Generally speaking, transactions are what makes the world go round. It's how capitalism works. And yet, there's transactional leaders and there's transformational leaders. And what we started to see is in the 2001-2002 period, because it was such a difficult time, many of us were just getting to the bottom of the pyramid. We were just focusing on survival. And so our executive committee of the company, which is our top 15 people, but you could do this with any committee within any group, any company that meets regularly, our top group of people would meet every Tuesday from 8 till 10 in the morning. And during that time, during the dot-com bust, it was a very depressing meeting every Tuesday when we'd have that meeting, because we'd spend 2 hours talking about all the problems and what we needed to solve. So we changed things. We said, for the last 10 minutes of our 2-hour meeting, let's focus on recognizing line-level employees out in the field. So each of the 15 people who were executive committee members had the opportunity, but not the obligation, to come to the meeting and in the last 10 minutes raise their hand and say, I want to recognize Joe the bellman at the Hotel Rex. Joe is a bellman there. We have one elevator at the Hotel Rex. It went down for 2 days, which is a problem if you have a 7-story hotel. And he worked 16 hours a day, double shifts, 2 days in a row, while his family was in town from New York. So he didn't really get to see his family, and he worked just 2 days in a row doing that in order for the hotel to have enough extra staff to make sure that we could carry bags up and down the stairs for the guests. So the vice president of operations would raise his hand and say, I want to recognize Joe. And then the vice president of IT or marketing would raise their hand and say, I will go say thank you to Joe. So 3 things came out of this implementation strategy on recognition. Number 1 is we ended our meetings, which were frankly pretty depressing meetings up to that point, on a positive note, which was important for the senior executives in the company to sort of feel like there's good news out there, but all we were talking about was the bad news. We were trying to solve problems as opposed to focusing on what's working. Number 2 is clearly Joe got recognized. And the truth is organizations are like ponds. I don't know if you've ever walked by a pond that smells bad. You might walk by a company in Silicon Valley that smells bad. A pond that's stagnant, where there's no water coming in, and there's things that are dying there. That's how many organizations are. You throw a stone in a pond, and there's a ripple effect. That ripple effect in the context of companies is our emotions. So fear is the number 1 emotion that sort of spreads contagiously in an organization. So the fact that Joe got recognized, all of a sudden the ripple effect for Joe, for those around him, was happiness. He was happy. He felt satisfied. He felt recognized. And starting to throw stones in the pond where people were feeling recognized in a very difficult time was counteracting the fear that most people were feeling. So Joe felt good. That was the second thing that was good. The third thing that came out of it that was good was the fact that the person who recognized Joe was not from operations, his department. It was somebody from IT or marketing. It was a different department. So the fact that we did cross-fertilization of recognition helped to break down the silos that happen, because as a company grows, as LinkedIn, I don't know who's in which departments here, but you start getting to a place where operations blames marketing, and marketing blames sales, and sales blames finance, and everybody blames HR. That's a specific example of how we did it. I can give you a bunch more, but the book is full of them. That's one of the good things about the book, is it's not just a theoretical book. It's very practical in terms of a bunch of things you can do. Other questions? Here's somebody. Yes.
Hi. First of all, it was a great presentation. I really
Thank you.
Appreciate that you were here and talk about the motivation and the value of what you're doing here. My question is mostly related to branding and design thinking and how you're integrating this to your own benefit and to your own success. We do have a branding team here within our company, and we're trying to push what we do to create action and motivate people to be successful in what they do and what they want to do down the line as a professionals. My question is mostly around branding. How do you integrate branding, or when do you integrate branding and design thinking to make a difference in what you do as a business person, as a professional?
Well, that's a big question. So let me try to give a specific example. Because there's the broader joie de vivre, and then there's the individual hotels. So I'll use it for an individual hotel, and it's one that Janine's familiar with because, while I can't announce specifics yet, we're working on opening a hotel in downtown Palo Alto. Can't say where or anything like that yet, but it's going to be really exciting. It's going to be a very high-end 4-star boutique hotel, and downtown Palo Alto needs one. So we are, after our meeting here at 11:45, I'm having lunch at IDEO, because last week we met with IDEO and we worked with them on the design thinking and the experiential thinking about what would make this world-class hotel in terms of being 5 years ahead of the hotel industry. If Apple thinks like design thinking of what is it that customers want 5 years from now, how do we think that way when it comes to the hotel experience? And if there's a place to do that, it's downtown Palo Alto. And so we do that internally as a company, but we are more and more looking at outside resources to come in and help us. And in this case, it's IDEO. A lot of it comes back to coming up with those 5 words. And last week, when we did a brainstorm with them, we came up with our 5 adjectives to define what we think this hotel will be. And then we'll take those 5 adjectives, which in this case sort of define what we see Palo Alto as. We see Palo Alto as curious, optimistic, entrepreneurial, tapped in, as in connected, and vital. And those are the 5 adjectives we're going to use to describe that hotel. And then we will look at, in the creation of that hotel, with the architect and the interior designer and IDEO, how do we make those 5 adjectives come to life? And in the process of creating the hotel, we may find we've got a lot of entrepreneurial elements of this hotel, but not enough of the curious elements. So how do we actually amp that up a little bit? So is that what you were looking for? Yeah. Okay, good. So that's how we do it. So those 5 adjectives, in essence, become a checklist for us as we're actually creating the hotels. All right. Last question.
A brief answer is likely going to be okay. Chip, thanks for coming. Really appreciate you being here.
Yeah,
so
thanks for having me. And keep up the great work, and congratulations. Congratulations.
And we know that you are always doing business that's good and doing well while doing well. You tend to give back, just you personally and your organizations. Are there ways that you feel that LinkedIn can power the social sector or the nonprofit world specifically, sort of as you think about it over time? How do you think LinkedIn can make a difference for nonprofit?
Well, I don't know what you currently do, so it's hard for me to be up here and tell you what I think you should do. But I think clearly in the idea, one of the biggest challenges in nonprofits, and I'm on the board of lots of nonprofits, is quite often is talent. How do they attract talent, and how do they get connected to talent? And I think I hope that the nonprofit industry has embraced LinkedIn as much as the for-profit industry has. And if not, how do you actually go out and reach out to nonprofits by showing up at their conferences, not with just a booth to talk about LinkedIn, but actually as a speaker, and figure out how do you get speakers from LinkedIn to speak at arts conferences or nonprofit health conferences and things like that, because you offer such an important opportunity to connect people and connect with, especially with those who are looking to transform their work from a career to a calling. There are a lot of people who have sort of burned out on the traditional career path, and they've burned out on just doing it in the normal for-profit industry. So the question is, how do you actually create the opportunity for that person, and there's a lot of people who fit that profile, a lot of people I know who fit that profile, and help them get matched with the right nonprofit opportunity that might actually become their calling. So if you're
music to our ears. That's music to our ears.
Well, if one of your themes at LinkedIn was how to move people up the pyramid from job to career to calling, gosh, I mean, that would be, you could be the company in the world that does that. And I promise you, that conversation I had with Gary Kelly in the back of the plane on Southwest Airlines, when he said that, and I realized, that's the magic. I said to him, I said, I wrote this book about job career calling and mojo and magic. And he said the word magic. He said, that's our magic. He says our magic is knowing that if we find people who can live their calling, that one of those people is worth 4 people at United.
Did he ask for 25% like Expedia?
No, he didn't.
Okay, great. Chip Conley, everybody.
Thank you. All right.